All right, we're here with Steve Toth. He's a candidate for State Representative, House District 15, his old seat. I'm John Wirtz. With me is Pat Tibbs, Dennis Tibbs, Bob Bagley, and Larry Rogers. Steve, you know the routine. What we do is a 5-minute opening and then go around the table with Q&A. Pat will be the timer for the 2-minute response time, and then we'll finish up with a 5-minute closing.
Okay. I represented House District 15 in 2013 through 15 as a member of the Texas Legislature. I came away with the 5th most conservative score out of 181 members. So Young Conservatives of Texas took all 150 House members, 31 senators. They scored us on legislation that was voted on both in the House and the Senate, and I came away with the 5th most conservative score. Ken Paxton, then Senator Ken Paxton, came away with the most conservative score. I was one of only 12 members of the Texas House that was deemed to be a taxpayer champion. One of only 17 members that was deemed to be pro-life, a pro-life member, and with a perfect score. And I worked hard for you guys. I went there and I said I wouldn't compromise my values, and I did not. That's it.
Okay.
Gravity's the soul of lead, I guess. Or so.
All right.
Whatever.
Okay, in our questionnaire, under the general part, the question was, what is the most important problem in the city that needs to be addressed by the position you're running for, and what do you propose to solve it? Your response was the underlying problem that will hamper any and all other solutions as it relates to issues is the Speaker of the House.
Correct.
Now that Joe Strauss has indicated that he will not run again, what happens next in the speakership in your opinion?
John Zerwas has already announced that he is going to run for that.
Who's that again?
Dr. John Zerwas.
Okay.
He's a Houston anesthesiologist, and Dr. Zerwas is, while he's not one of the original 12, he is one of Strauss's bishops. That's what we're calling them. And he is probably the most influential one of the group that is still there. And Dr. Zerwas just after the shooting that took place in San Antonio this past weekend, Zerwas couldn't wait to say we have to look at gun control issues and implementing gun control in Texas. This guy is a Democrat that lives in a predominantly Republican area, and he knows that in order to run and win, he has to run as a Republican. But he will just be more of the same. The same day that he announced that his candidacy for Speaker, the Democrats announced that they would be staying together and that they would cast their votes all together. Whether they're 55 or 45 or 60, they will cast one vote for all the same person, which means that Zerwas has already probably spoken with them, which means that he then needs to pull in 22 to 23 Republicans, and we'll have a gang of 22 again. So we're going to have to fight it, but this time, here's the deal, we're going to fight it from day one. And unless we can keep the caucus together, and that's obviously the hope, is that we'll pick within the caucus.
How do you spell Zerwas's last?
Z-E-R-W-A-S. Z-E-R.
Z-E-R.
Yeah, W-A-S.
How long has he been in the House?
He's been there, I think, Dennis, about 12 years.
Okay, next.
Go Dennis.
Okay, well, on the education section, you said that you'd do away with most of the standard testing except for one SAT at graduation. You think that's going to work?
Well, if you can't conceive of it happening, if you can't have a vision for it happening, you'll never achieve it. High stakes testing has never worked. And what we end up doing is we end up spending 20 weeks every year teaching kids to the test instead of really educating them. Because high stakes testing, a lot of people when they first heard about high stakes testing used to believe that there was some value in it, right? But the more and more you really look into it, the more and more you find out it's just not working. It's not working anywhere. Because what you're going to, in essence, doing, you're going to penalize the school if the kids don't test well, right? That means funding, that means accreditation. And what ends up happening then is there's all this administrative pressure on the teachers to come up with good test scores. And if they don't come up with good test scores, you know, there's trouble. And so what ends up happening is kids are taught to the test the whole time. This has gone on forever and a day. And, you know, right now, when I walked, I knocked on 7,500 doors myself when I ran the first time in one. My team knocked on 15,000 doors as a whole. And what I heard from parents, what I heard from teachers, what I heard from administrators, and what I heard from kids is that STAR does not work. If none of the 4 stakeholders believe that the state of Texas assessment of academic readiness does not work, then there's no way it's ever going to work. We need to do away with it.
Why don't they have tests where nobody knows when they're gonna have it and what's on the test, and just be responsible for a broad area of knowledge and see how well the teachers are doing without knowing exactly what questions are gonna be asked?
You know, Dennis, I think there are a lot of ways to judge a school. And you can judge it by the dropout rate, you can judge it by the rate of kids, number of kids that graduate, you can judge it by the SAT scores, you can judge it by the number of kids that go on to college.
All right, thanks.
We recently had a Senate hearing here in Montgomery County with, for the flooding that took place during Harvey. There are a lot of issues that we have in Montgomery County that we can't fund ourselves. And there's a lot of things like San Jacinto River Authority and some of the tributaries that are not within the realm or responsibility of the county. Do you have any plan for what you can do or feel that you can do through legislation or financing as a legislator to help the counties, especially Montgomery County?
Yeah, so first off, the San Jacinto River Authority and river authorities across the state of Texas, the boards, we need to quit appointing and we need to start electing them. And the whole idea of having a river authority whose primary responsibility is flood mitigation, to have no one on the board that understands hydraulic engineering or aquatic engineering without any engineering at all, for that matter, on that board is ridiculous. The closest thing the San Jacinto River Authority has to a technical person on that board is an HVAC person. That's ridiculous. The big problem we had, and you know, people continue to say, you know, with the Harvey event, we still would have had flooding, no matter what they did. And you know, there's some truth to that. But here's what we can say as well. If they had not opened that dam up at 79,000 CFS, cubic feet per second, which equates to 596,000 gallons per second, if they had instead opened that thing up when the rain started falling 6 hours earlier, or even, geez, even if they opened it up 6 hours before the rain, not several days, but just 6 hours before the rain, and then left the peak open at 33 or 34,000 CFS for 12 hours, we wouldn't have washed homes off their foundations. It wouldn't. We all know that there was going to be flooding, but because they released so much volume, it created velocity that tore homes off their foundations. And the thing that just angers me to no end is the fact that there was no modeling in place. None. They never paid for any modeling to be done to find out if they could do what they did. And people paid for it, Bob.
James.
Well, you know, every election, anybody that runs for state office, particularly Democrats, the one topic they try to trumpet, you know, for new revenue, new taxes is education. So what is your position on our current revenue allocation for education? Does it need to be increased, decreased, reallocated?
We need responsible spending of educational dollars. There's absolutely no accountability once the state of Texas doles money out to a CISD, what they do with it. It's called the Cost of Education Index, CEI money. And a different percentage or amount is gonna go to a West Texas school that has a hard time attracting teachers than to the Woodlands, as an example, where we have a big fat tax base, right? And where we've got a high standard of living. It's easy for us in the Woodlands to attract teachers than it is for a rural part of Texas. So those West Texas communities, on a per pupil basis, get more CEI money, Cost of Education Index money. Here's the problem though. James, there are 1,234 ISDs in the state of Texas.
Okay.
Only 5 of them use 100% of their Cost of Education Index money in the classroom. Conroe is one of them. Conroe Independent School District is one of them. They spend 101% of their CEI money. Some of these schools spend as little as 50% of their CEI money in the classroom. I mean, it goes towards football helmets, scoreboards, AstroTurf, stadiums, you name it. But not in the classroom. The largest educator in the United States today is the state of Texas education system. And think about it, Texas isn't even as big as California as far as number of residents. Yet we have more employees in the state of Texas education system than California does. It's a 1-to-1 ratio between teachers and non-teachers. 20 years ago, for every 1 teacher, there were 5, I'm sorry, for every 5 teachers, there was only 1 non-teacher.
So to be clear, you're saying we have too many teachers or too many administrative
Too
staff?
many administrative, and a lot of this is the fault that we've created in the state of Texas. We've created all these unfunded mandates. So helping the districts means more accountability for how they use the money, and it also means less strings down to the ISDs.
Thank you.
Okay, in our questionnaire, in the general category, 4 questions down. The question was, what are the 3 main reasons you're running for office? Do you see any potential conflicts of interest? And I just want to clarify the statements that you made. Number 1, you answered the Republican Party has lost its way, and then the line under that, which is what I wanted to clarify, you said that those who know their way have lost their spine and refuses to stand up. I did that in the 83rd session, and I'll do it again. Let me read that again, because maybe it's only me, but you made the statement, those who knew the way have lost their way.
Yeah, Larry, let me explain it to you. That we've got all these guys that say all the right things, and they get elected, and then once there, they lose their spine. I mean, you can sit down with these people and you'll have a discussion with them, and they believe all the right things, and they'll say all the right things, but their sense of conviction runs this deep. When I went there, I had all the right beliefs, and I stuck to my word, and I did what I said I was going to do. I never lost my sense of conviction. I didn't lose my way, and that comes from just a sense of deep conviction. And that's the problem, is that, and I had a friend that once said to me early on, he was a mentor to me, Pat Maloney, he's executive vice president of Xerox, and he said, you never know what flavor a person's character is or how deep their character is until they're dropped in hot water. And the hottest water in the state of Texas is Austin, Texas. And there's every opportunity to do the right thing, to do the wrong thing there. Because everyone's pushing you there to do the wrong thing. And I stuck to my guns, I did the right thing, I voted the right way, and I refused to compromise my values.
And I appreciate that, and I know that's what you meant, but the way the next sentence was.
I understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah, it said
I understand what you're trying to say.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay. And the education, you've touched on, what we need to do. Is there anything else that we can do besides what you've already mentioned about rebuilding our educational system?
As long as unfunded mandates at the federal and state level keep going down to the ISDs, then the ISDs are going to continue to hire administrators that we can't afford, and it's got to stop. And we need to send, there needs to be accountability of how they're spending the money.
Okay.
Under taxes category, the question is, or was, what is your view regarding reducing or eliminating property taxes in favor of increased sales taxes and increased user fees? You mentioned that you visited
Stafford,
Mayor
Texas.
Stafford back 4 years ago, and that they run their city with no property taxes. Would you sponsor,
Yes.
carry legislation pertaining
Yeah,
to this if
absolutely.
elected?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did that in what does it say, 2013? Because it was actually,
2013.
you know, it may have been October 2013 when I went. October or November 2013. But this is a city that's run by Democrats. And they have no debt. They do zero-based budgeting every single year, they have to. And they don't spend money until it comes in. So, Bob, you went with me, right? And here's the thing that's wild is that they do that on 2 cents, right? Because the state sales tax is 6.25, they're only allowed to charge 8.25. So they do that on 2 cents. And Stafford's not the only one doing it. I might add that there are a lot of border cities that are doing the same thing, that are run by Hispanic city councils, property tax free. And businesses are beating a path to those places to set up shop. It creates jobs, creates opportunity. It's just the way to go.
Any idea how much that would cost going in, if not property taxes, and it's a consumption tax? What are we looking at?
You know, we've heard that it would be as high as 19%, but those are the same people that are trying to talk us out of it. They're trying to scare us away from it. I think that's ridiculous. You would have to do some kind of impact study to know exactly how much it would cost. I don't know, but I'm not inclined to believe that it would be 13 additional, or I'm sorry, that it would, it would be 11 additional cents. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Would it be immediate or scaled in over time?
You could, I mean, you do one of two ways. You could phase the property tax out while you're phasing the consumption tax in, or you could, do it cold turkey. Rip the Band-Aid off it, I say.
So to do that in Montgomery County, there's not another 2 cents left, right? So the legislature would have to do something about it.
No, the county's taking the 2 cents right now. Oh, no, I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry. The individual taxing districts are taking the 2 cents right now. So the Woodlands takes the 2 cents right now, and this is, the Woodlands the Woodlands Township, in short, what it is, it's a special purpose tax district. That's really, it's a glorified POA slash a special purpose tax district. That's really all that they can do. They can't do anything other than that.
So around here, the 8 1/4 is already pretty much taken up everything.
It's all taken up.
So we're gonna have to pass some legislation to allow that replacement for property taxes?
So, do you live in an incorporated or unincorporated
We're
area right now?
unincorporated, but I think other groups
Have already done
have
it.
already tried to take it.
Right, so like take the 2978, 1488 corridor, right? That's a special purpose tax district, and they've taken all 2 cents to do that. And part of this, Dennis, excuse me, is just, it's pushing these municipal utility districts, special purpose tax districts, and putting them in their place and making them go away.
This is really not part of my question, but I just changed TV providers, and I got my bill, and there's a $3 or $4 law enforcement tax that everybody apparently collects to give to the law enforcement here. That is a tax without representation, right?
Yeah.
And how are they allowed to do that?
I don't know. I'm not familiar with it.
Okay.
I'd love to comment on it, I just don't know anything about it. I'd have to look into it.
Were you down 911
Anyway, just one quick question back on the other page since I have a few seconds. You're talking about eliminating compulsory education?
Right.
That means nobody has to go to school?
That means a kid that doesn't belong there, that detracts from and that is taking the quality of education down for the other 30 students, you either behave or you're gone. But there's no way that one kid should be able to destroy the learning experience for the other 30 children and the teacher.
Wasn't that gonna cause a lot of people who want to keep their kids home mowing the yard or something, to just say, we're not gonna educate.
You know,
our
maybe,
kids.
maybe parents need to start parenting their children. And if I mean, I know that as a kid, if I back-talked to a teacher, then my mom found out about it, and my dad found out about it, and that wasn't a good thing.
That's what
Yeah.
should be compulsory.
Yeah.
All right. go.
I guess I want to go back to the flooding, and not having the finances, locally to take care
You're
of.
assuming that we don't have the finances locally though, Bob. And so right now, what the River Authority is doing with that money,
Right.
it's completely unaccountable.
I understand, not just the River Authority though, but even for the counties, going out there and looking at the ditches that are out there, or the canals that are out there that really are not county's responsibility.
That
There's-
watershed is San Jacinto River Authority's responsibility.
But it's only along San Jacinto River.
Right.
It's not the other tributaries that are coming through
Then
there.
that's something that the county needs to take care of.
Well, the county can't take care of
Why?
that because I don't know. I don't know where the authority is
Now-
coming from for them to be able to go to Caney Creek and actually clear out the debris in Caney Creek. It's a tributary, but it's not part of.
I don't
San
believe
Jacinto.
that, I do not believe that they're not allowed to do that. Now, if someone could show me a court ruling where a county has been told, you're not allowed to clean that creek up, then I'd love to hear about that, and I will be about that all day long, going before the courts or the legislature to give clarification to that. This is ridiculous.
Well, I know for a fact that I've seen the deeds where it states that the county has the authority to come on property to clean ditches, and the county says, no, we can't do that.
Yeah,
Back to the modes.
Yeah,
I really struggle with that.
I mean, too, but that's, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we know that you'll be representing us to the public, so my question is, if you're elected, next time you're on, I have two questions. First one is, next time you're on CNN, will you be rolling your eyes, Wolf Blitzer?
I was told not to do that, but it was just such a stupid question on his part that I had to roll my eyes.
The second question, along that line really, your last time your notable legislation, I think, of state rights and gun rights. What are your plans for your signature legislation this session?
You know, here's the
Coming
funny
soon.
thing, I got so much criticism from Republicans that my bill was unconstitutional. And to which I then responded by saying, do you like Greg Abbott? He was our Attorney General. Do you like him? Oh, I love Greg Abbott. He wrote my bill.
There you go.
I mean, Daniel Hodge was his aide. He was to General Abbott what Radar O'Reilly was to Colonel Potter, and he would finish his sentences for him. He knew what he was thinking, and Daniel's brilliant, and he's probably one of the most incredible legal minds in the state of Texas. And we worked on that bill for the better part of 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, with he and Jay Dyer and the Attorney General, until we came up with something we felt like was, excuse the expression, but was absolutely bulletproof. And it passed in the Texas House. In fact, 3/4 of the House, it was the only bill that got support from law enforcement. All the other gun bills, none of them got law enforcement support, not a one. In fact, the San Antonio Police Officers Union came and actually testified on behalf of it. And we worked really hard to get them on board and to get their support. We wanted, the reason why a lot of these LEOs didn't enforce those bills is because no one ever took the time to explain them. We did, but we're gonna push that bill through again, because Donald Trump's not gonna be here forever. And we gotta make sure that we've got good legislation in place to protect states' rights as pertains to protecting my Second Amendment right and your Second Amendment right.
Thank you.
Turn it over to you. That
Um,
doesn't mean you're gonna get my time and yours.
Yeah.
right.
Okay, this is under general and category. And the question was, list at least 2 improvements that can be legislated to prevent the abuses of special purpose districts, which you just talked about. by developers. One was in gerrymandered districts, and I'll get to the second one if we have enough time. How does that exactly enable abuses?
Take road utility,
Gerrymandered
yeah, take
districts.
road utility district number 1. If you take a highlighter pen of the Woodlands and you draw that highlighter pen east to west down the Woodlands Parkway, and then up Research, and then down Kirkendall and down Gosling, it only hits on, it only impacts businesses, not a single residence, not one. And so what it does is it's taxation without representation, gerrymandering the district so that you make sure that you don't allow anyone to vote on that thing other than the stakeholders that benefit from it. This was a special purpose tax district created by and for the Woodlands Operating Company. And it's wrong that the state of Texas would ever allow something like that to exist.
So what do? I mean, do you just allow RUDs, or is it certain criteria they are
So,
sunset?
first off, they should all have a sunset, and and they should be looked at on a regular basis. You know, one of the issues with these MUDs and RUDs and special purpose tax districts too now is that you'll see these things have been created. They're in place taxing their 2 cents for years, never having done anything other than built a beautiful building that they can meet in and taking excursions. I mean, it's criminal. And there's little to no oversight of these MUDs and RUDs and special purpose tax districts. And while, yes, that may be the exception and not the rule, it's criminal that stuff can go on.
The second part of the question and your answer was require all board of director meetings be held within the geographic area of the expertise.
Right, there are a lot of these RUDs that have their meetings down in the city of Houston at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. Who can go to something like, what person that lives within that MUD that's impacted by it could ever go to one of those meetings? They have to be held up here within the geographic boundary of the MUD.
Okay. Every other year, we have legislative sessions, and legislators pass thousands of laws. And those laws dictate what citizens can do and threaten us with various kinds of penalty, imprisonment, and fines if we don't do it. Frequently, they also specify what government should do. But in the government's case, it's entirely optional. And you know, I've learned that the hard way. Ken Paxton says the legislature has not given him any enforcement authority. We see all these cases where governments just strictly ignore the law, and including the public information law and many, many others. So what can we do to get rid of all those laws? I was actually surprised when Keogh passed a law, and one of the sentences said, if the government does not abide by this, they are subject to prosecution by the Attorney General. And then I found out that that's extremely rare. Most laws don't have any teeth regarding what the government
And
does.
citizens can't sue for enforcement either.
We can do it, and if we don't obey the law, we go to jail. If they don't obey the law, nobody cares. And some of them are unbelievably ignorant the way that they disobey it in plain open sight. So how are we going to fix that?
So the one, I'm going to use an analogy to explain my response to Mark's bill. I love Mark's bill. I love the idea of Mark's bill, but it's like commissioning someone to go fight gangs with a butter knife, right? So to say that the Attorney General can take these guys on, that's nice, but the problem is statutorily, the Attorney General doesn't have any authority to do it, right? So good thought, but it just doesn't get it done. And I honestly believe that the only way we can get this thing done is by taking these people out, voting them out of office. Because the problem, Ken talked about this a little bit at the Republican Women's Luncheon this past week, is that statutorily, district attorneys are accountable to no one in the state of Texas. Did you know that?
I do, yeah.
They're accountable, a district attorney is accountable to no one in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
And that would, the only remedy on that would be, is to change the Constitution. But at the end of the day, the only one they are accountable to is the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
In fact, I contacted them several times on the issue that I have, and the FBI said they would only take a complaint if it involved hospitalization of somebody. And I worked a lot with Cornyn and Abbott and everybody else. But at any rate, waiting to vote them out is not good enough. That's just like the issue we have with Highway 249. If we wait till we get a new crew in there, 249 is going to be built. And that's with almost every issue.
What about a recall option? We don't have that.
We don't have a recall option, and I wouldn't be against that. I'd love to see us do that.
We need to. Around Bob.
14 seconds.
We're about halfway through.
Road financing, highway financing. We're doing pass-through financing in Montgomery County where we're doing the bonds,
Yeah.
we're fixing state roads, and then the state's paying us back little at a time every year to.
With our tax dollars.
With our tax dollars.
And then we pay for it a third time with tolls.
Exactly. How do we eliminate this? How do we hold TxDOT? I could go off on TxDOT for a long time. How do we hold them accountable for their responsibility of taking care of the roads that are out there, instead of putting the burden back on the counties? I mean, we sit and look at the state budget and say, we're in great shape as far as debt for the state. Yeah, because all the debt's coming down to the counties and municipalities because the state isn't doing their job.
Yeah, I like to use the analogy, it doesn't matter where a ship is taking water on.
It's taking water, it's
It's
gonna
taking
sink.
water and it's gonna sink, right? And so the state of Texas can say, hey, we have no debt. Well, county is all the debt, that's because it's all held by counties and ISDs. And that are holding road bond debt. And Texas has as much debt or more debt on a per capita basis, and I think we have more debt on a per capita basis than any state in the union. And I think on a total debt basis, we're number 2 to New York, which we should be ashamed of. And the way that they do it every year is they push more and more responsibility, state responsibility, down to the counties. And the counties are subdivisions of the state of Texas, right? So they're like a battered wife. The counties didn't create the state government creates the counties. And so the counties just have to kind of take the abuse that the state of Texas gives them. And it's time that as citizens that we put the state in line and say, what you're doing is wrong. It's not transparent, we're still taking on debt. All these dedicated funds that we've got out there for roads and bridges are being abused. They're using the money from and it's just going into the general fund. There's something like 400 dedicated funds. The gas tax is one of those dedicated funds. It's the biggest dedicated fund in the state of Texas, and vast majority of it is just going into general revenue spending. So it's got to stop.
Do you have one opponent or 2?
One, I believe.
One. So, in general, for anybody watching this, what would be your argument for someone to vote for you instead of your opponent?
So I'm not going to say anything about my opponent. I'll just talk about me. Over the years.
Well, what would you do that your opponent probably would not or would not be able to? That's not really negative.
Okay, that's not negative. Okay, well, if you put it that way. I stood up to Strauss. I've spoken openly and I opposed him.
Yeah, you did. I remember that.
And over again. In fact, before I even got sworn in, the Austin American Statesman and the Tribune both ran stories that I wrote against the speaker. And I took a strong stand against him before I got sworn in, and I took a very strong stance against him while I was there. And my opponent had the opportunity to speak out against Joe Strauss when the executive committee for Montgomery County took a vote sanctioning Strauss for his behavior and his opposition to the Republican Party platform, his opposition and really just incredibly rude behavior towards the lieutenant governor and the governor, calling the governor's special session call a pile of manure.
Yeah.
And instead of going along with the other members of the county executive committee, my opponent chose to support Strauss, which makes no sense to me at all. I think she said later on she wasn't really sure who Joe Strauss was or why people were taking a stance against him, which, I mean, I don't know how you live in the state of Texas as a Republican and not know
Well,
who
it
Joe
was
Strauss.
explained when that proposal was made. It was explained
I know,
who
you
Joe
read-
Strauss
yeah,
is,
yeah.
why we were doing it.
Yeah.
Anything else that you would do that she probably would not?
I've been a student of the budget, and, you know, I'm a lot farther down the line as far as really understanding how the spending of our dollars happen. And a big problem that we have right now is you've got all these bureaucrats in Austin that try and talk circles around you. And it's bull. And you've got to know what's going on, where the money's going, where it's coming from, and how it's spent, to stop them in their tracks and make them do the right thing.
Okay, thanks.
Going back to what Dennis had talked about, and you confirmed that VA, nobody controls. In other words, if he decides not to take something and do something with it, then nothing happens. He doesn't answer to anyone.
Larry, are you talking about whether it's a bill or no bill as far as an indictment?
Yeah. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? That
So-
shocks me.
Yeah, so the way an indictment or the possibility of indictment happens is a grand jury's convened in secret. It would be a room just like this. And they would put 12 to 14 people around a table. The DA or an assistant DA would come in there and he'd lay his case out. And he'd call witnesses. And the defense is not allowed to call any witnesses. The defense is not even allowed to be there. It's just the district attorney and a group of people. And hence the expression, a DA could indict a ham sandwich if he wanted to. But they have the power to bill or no bill, whether to bring an indictment forward or not bring an indictment forward. And I think Dennis's concern was something a little different. I think your concern was, what do you do when law enforcement and a district attorney has done something wrong?
And the DAs in practice don't have to speak to citizens, they don't have to respond to VRs, they don't have to answer certified mail, they don't have to call a grand jury if they don't want to, they just pretty much run their show.
And they don't have to call a grand jury if they don't want to, right? And so that is something, you know, again, that is something, honestly, the only way around that is, this is why we elect. We don't select, why we elect district attorneys. And if we don't feel like they're doing a good job, then the citizens have to, pick somebody else.
Well, we did have that case dealing with the RUD where our DA chose not to pursue it, and then the Attorney General steps in.
Well, right, so you had a situation where with Jim and Adrian and
Right.
the other 8 people, our DA, in his estimation, would feel that a crime had been committed. And so, yes.
Did not.
Did not.
Did not, right.
Did not believe that a crime had been committed. And it was then that the Attorney General stepped in and prosecuted the case.
Just want to be clear on that.
Sure.
For the camera. While we're on that subject, the residency law, and this is under due process, the residency law as it pertains to voting in Texas is ambiguous at best. Some have been selectively prosecuted while others receiving compensation, like cheap rent, have been allowed to escape. Will you carry legislation that clarifies this ambiguity? And if so, generically speaking, what will it say? You did reply that I would eliminate the snowbird provision forcing voters to choose a permanent place of residency. So the second part of that question was, if elected, will you carry the legislation?
Yes. So what that basically means is that if you live in New York in the summertime and you live in Texas in the wintertime, you've got to choose where you're going to vote. And that means you've got to declare Texas or New York as a state of residence. So residency is no longer a state of mind.
You have to
And I
have
would-
physical.
You have to have physical, and you can have a physical residence in both places, but you've got to decide, this is where my residency is.
Physical residence.
Physical residence,
And that's where you're gonna vote from.
that's where you're gonna vote from.
Because we actually have a precinct chair right now that has a physical residence that votes out of his office.
Right.
So what
That
you
would
propose,
That would, yeah, but
that would go away.
that would go away. You can't vote from your office.
What if you're a president though, like we've had, lives in DC, but,
His physical residence is New York City.
no, I was talking about Bush. Matter of fact, that's why the law was made so vague, so that he could claim there's a hotel room in Houston as his legal residence for voting purposes.
He would have to claim a physical residence, and he's actually got to live there.
But if he's president,
Another-
he lives in the White House.
No, he doesn't. He's still got a residence somewhere.
Or governor lives in Austin.
Well, I mean, he's still got a residence somewhere. He's got a house,
Permanent
somewhere.
residence.
Permanent residence, yeah.
I don't think he did, Bush.
Did he sell his casa or something? Well, I mean, so Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, had a place up in Maine that he's owned for years.
Yeah, that's true too.
Right? And George W. Bush had the ranch right here in Texas.
Yeah.
So there's absolutely no reason why they can't claim a residence
Yeah, you can pick
somewhere.
either one.
You would think.
Is your opponent a precinct chair?
Yes.
You know, the way that money comes to school districts and police departments and things like that, they're subject to blackmail and coercion from the federal government. And the school district, police department are subject to coercion from the federal government with the money they hand out and tie strings to. So my question is, why can't we have a system where any outside money to a state agency has to come through the legislature and then go back to the schools or the police department? Because right now, they're not accountable to the state when they get a lot of their money from the feds.
Schools don't, the police do get a chunk.
Well,
Schools got, the only thing they get is money for food. From the federal
So,
government.
no, so he's right, though, so a bunch of the Leo money will come through the state,
Yeah.
but then there are grants. There are grants
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
and departments, individual departments will have grant writers come in to try and go after money for different
and
things.
there's probably things like SGRA and other groups that get money from the feds, grant money from the feds.
Right.
And why wouldn't it be funneled through the state?
Do you want more bureaucracy?
Well,
Look, here, here's my thing, Dennis.
Well, that'd be a block
I'd
grant.
love to see
Yeah.
I'd love to see all block grants come to the state,
Yeah.
right? But at the end of the day too, I wanna see us do away with 100% of the strings tied. Cause right now, I had this discussion with Don Stockton. I said, Don, if state mandates, federal mandates went away tomorrow, what would that do to your budget? And he said, oh, we could cut 15% right off the top. 15% right off the top. And that's without even thinking too hard. And I gotta believe that based on the number of employees that have been hired, forced to be hired, that it'd probably be much higher than that.
Well, you know, the story you've always heard with regards to things like C-scope is that individual school districts basically negotiate deals with the feds to introduce C-scope and other things in exchange for grant money.
Well, that's not how it happened with C-scope. C-scope was created by ESC 13 out of Austin, and it was illegal. They created a 501c3 without permission from the state of Texas, which ESCs are not allowed to create 501c3s. They have to do it legislatively. And we still don't know where nearly $3 million of that money went.
But in the case of whichever groups do get those monies, if they get money coming from the state and they get money coming from the Fed, then they're not going to be accountable to either one. If the Fed wants to give our police department flapjackets, then they ought to go through the state and let the state at least give it to them to make sure that it's being used properly.
Is that a question or a comment?
That was advocation.
I was waiting for an answer.
I was looking for somebody
Well, I
to
looked at Steve and I was like,
Yeah,
You're so right, Dennis. Wow, you're on fire.
Well, and to carry on with that a little bit, you know, the feds do give monies directly to the schools dependent upon if they have military members, their children, military kids that are in, or federal employees,
Well, yeah.
children that are in the schools. So that money goes
There's no
directly.
strings to that, though.
There's no strings to that, no. But there is accountability for that, and there's a little bit of fudging that goes along with it, and that's why there's problems there. I'm gonna pass because I started to write it down and I forgot.
Something
Can I
to
comment on that?
Pardon me?
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
So in 2011, this was coming off the economic downturn, right? And that was the 82nd legislative session where they cut $15 billion. It was a hard cut. It wasn't a rate of growth cut. It was a hard cut of $15 billion. Yet during that period of time, education did not get a cut. It got a rate of growth cut. But we spent more in 2011 or 2009. There was no cut. Yet, we heard from district after district, Fort Bend ISD being one of them, that said, we're gonna have to lay off 200 teachers. Remember they said that? How many teachers did they lay off? Big goose egg. What did they then do? They went out and bought iPads for kindergartners
Yeah.
through second grade. A kindergartner with an iPad? Boy, I'll bet that didn't break very quickly. You know, I mean, this is ridiculous, right? So what do we do every time there's an economic downturn? We go to parents and say, you know what, Susie's math teacher's gonna have to be fired. And it gets the parents all spun up. This is baloney. Why is it we put the teachers in peril every time there's an economic downturn, when the reality is it's a problem that's created by administrators? Pure and simple.
So while we're still talking schools, and you mentioned the number of ISDs that we have in the state, would you, or do you believe the legislature would be willing to reduce the number of ISDs and have one ISD per county?
I would love to see us consolidate ISDs. The problem that you have is the lack of willingness on the part of state lawmakers to make that happen, Bob. Yeah, I mean, it's
Because
just,
of the lobby money coming into their,
it's really not the lobby money,
No.
you're gonna eliminate my football team, you're gonna eliminate my baseball team, we're state champions, Bob.
no, we're not eliminating them. They can still compete, but they're gonna be under one ISD
That's the
instead
problem.
of, yes.
Yeah, so my mascot goes away and.
No,
and-
each
and-
school still has its own mascot. Every school would still stay the same, but you're eliminating
The Board of
administration wise.
Education, right, I see what you're saying.
You're eliminating a bunch of money that goes out to superintendents. You have one superintendent in the county instead of 5 superintendents in a county or more.
It's-
And all of that staff that goes along with that.
Yeah, and now you're back to the lobby money, and this is the problem, is that, it's a great idea, and I'd love to champion something like that if you'll work with me on it. I think we'll get a massive amount of pushback, but it's worth a try. I'd love to try and do it.
Well,
Because I've never looked at it, it's kind of a hybrid solution, right, where you're still allowing the schools to stay open.
right,
You're just simply saying there's gonna be one Board of Education.
right.
And here's the benefit in doing it. It would work, as an example, I got criticized by a Montgomery ISD board member when I brought C-Scope underneath the purview of the State Board of Education. And Steve said to me, he said, why are you doing that? We use C-Scope. Montgomery ISD used C-Scope. I said, Steve, you have no idea what's in C-Scope, because as a Christian, if you knew what was in it, he would be opposed to it. And then I told him about the Senate hearings and what transpired there, and he was just blown away at what was in it. The benefit of what you're doing, of what you're talking about, would be the idea that Dan Patrick and I talked about in 2013, whereby bigger ISDs share curriculum writing. So right now, the reason why a little district like Montgomery would use C-Scope is because of the fact that they don't have the funding to create a curriculum writing department. Well, why can't they work with CISD, right? Why can't CISD work with Willis? Why can't they work with Montgomery and so on, right? To create and help them with curriculum writing, and that would be the very first step, is that one ISD in a per county would help with curriculum writing. maybe that would be the first step towards doing something like this.
The largest taxing entity in every county is the ISDs.
Yeah.
Well, with my question along those lines is, I was gonna ask about this too. I actually asked your predecessor when we talked to him. And that's the fact that right now our educational system is no different than it was 50 years ago when I was in school.
I don't believe
Going
that, I
on
think it's
60
worse.
years. Yeah, that's very likely true too.
I mean,
But the point is,
dropout
it's
rate,
still brick
everything
and
else.
mortar, well, yeah, it's still brick and mortar, you go to class, it's like mass manufacturing of education to students that need really individualized education based on their learning abilities and weaknesses and strengths. So my question would be, why have any ISDs? Just abolish them all, abolish all the school boards. And basically, we have the state, with participation of all the different schools, develop an online criteria like Khan Academy and maybe use an existing one. And then your schools basically simply provide a facility for material that's being developed and it's advanced and it can be customized based on each individual student. And get rid of all this stuff, because right now ISD's only function is basically to take all the tax dollars, so you can't do charter schools really, and you can't really do homeschooling very effectively. Who needs any of that?
I know, and so your
Other than
idea
football
is,
teams.
you're right, your idea is centralize it at the state level.
Not really centralize it, abolish it, make it more free market. The only thing to centralize might be developing or paying for the developed curriculum options, but make them pervasive. Like, why have everybody get the same, one of two types of high school degrees? All right, one's college prep and the other isn't. How does that make any sense? Even if I want to go to college, why am I having to learn material that would only be used by a liberal education, whereas I want a technical degree? So it's very antiquated, it hasn't been
Completely.
advanced in decades, and it's a huge expense on our local, our local.
We're penny wise and dollar foolish, so we've created so much bureaucracy that we don't have time to educate kids on just basic skills. When you and I were kids, we
Well,
went
you
to-
don't even do well on the skills that they would be excelling.
No, I know, but like, so,
Being held back.
when you and I were kids, we had metal shop, we had wood shop. I learned how to use
Yeah.
a metal lathe, a wood lathe. I learned how to use an arc welder and a acetylene torch. I learned how to
Yeah.
temper steel.
I learned how to make explosives.
Yeah, I mean, it was, but the wild thing is that we
During
don't,
Vietnam.
we really don't, to steal a Trump,
HISD.
to steal a Trumpism, we don't really make anything in America anymore.
Just about.
And it's because we're not teaching kids how to be creative and to work with
Yeah.
their hands to create anything. And Steve Jobs would tell you that was one of the essential things that, he was, Pat, you're holding an iPhone right there. And he was the father of the iPhone. And his dad taught him how to use his hands and build things as a kid, and to build them with excellence. And that's what sent him down that creative path. We're not doing that anymore. So
No, we need to
instead,
provide them opportunities.
we've adopted this STEM education
Yeah,
mentality that
that's
all
right.
kids must be STEM taught.
Mhm.
The most egregious thing that I saw when I was in the state of Texas legislature was in Giddings, Texas. As you're driving through Giddings to Austin, you stop at Buc-ee's. Right across the road and down the street is the Giddings Institute, where they've got all these teenage kids all locked up for violent crime. These are kids that have dropped out of school. 80% of the kids in Harold Dutton's district drop out by their sophomore year. 80% of them will wind up at Giddings. And the wild thing is that they're learning how to do auto body, they're learning how to be car mechanics, they're learning how to rough, they're learning how to be finishing carpenters, they're learning how
Great
to be
skills.
electricians. They're learning skills and they're loving
Yeah.
it, they're enjoying it. There's a scripture verse that says where people have no vision, they
They
perish.
perish, that's right.
Or they perish for lack of vision.
Yeah.
And we've not given these kids anything that they can hope for or idealize. And so they just drop out because they look at it and say, STEM education, science, technology, are you kidding me? Engineering, math, seriously? And they drop out. But if we taught them a skill that they could use when they get out of high school, they'd stay in. Most of them would stay in, I believe.
Well, I'm going to say what Obama should have said. We need to fundamentally change our educational system.
Yep.
Last question, Claire.
On our general questions, number 2, do you support interposition and nullification as it pertains to Texas state sovereignty? Could you explain a little of that?
Sure, so interposing and nullifying. Nullification is when the state, it's when the state, as an example, the state of California has decided they are going to become a sanctuary state. And they then pass law to nullify federal law, right? They're nullifying. Interposing is what 340 cities around the United States do when they ignore federal immigration law and they decide that they're going to become a sanctuary city. Nullification is when the state of Colorado decides that marijuana is going to be legal. And they're nullifying federal law by creating legislation that walks in disobedience to federal drug laws. That's nullification and that's interposition. And I am a big, huge proponent of nullifying and interposing when the federal government infringes on our constitutional rights. And you know, the Constitution says that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And life being preeminent within that, the federal government, it's led to the slaughter of millions and millions and millions and millions of babies. And I think the state of Texas needs to honor their God and needs to honor this constitutional right that babies have to life and needs to tell the federal government we're not going to obey it.
Since we've got about 30 seconds left, quick question. Transportation. Some say we're so far behind that gasoline taxes are not enough to fix existing roads and build new roads. If so, how do we go around that? And what would you do if elected?
I disagree. I disagree that
Think we got enough there?
I think we have enough there. I really do. I do believe
Even
that
with the diversions, or just?
you've got to eliminate the diversions. You've got to eliminate all the diversions.
But if you bring the diversions back, we're almost starting from ground zero, and we're so far behind.
Think
How
about,
do you
yeah, but
make
think
up
about
for
this a
that?
second, John. I mean, it used to be, the drivers of the budget are education, medication, incarceration, and transportation. Transportation used to be 20% of the budget. It's 3% of the budget today. In the 82nd legislative session, they cut $15 billion without batting an eyelash, while they still raised the amount of money spent on both education and Medicaid. There is so much slush and fluff built into this budget. We absolutely have the money to do this. We absolutely do. The tax, look at how big, look at the number of residents we have in this state, and look at the tax burden. Has the tax burden gotten lighter or has it gotten heavier?
Lighter, I thought.
It's gotten heavier. It's gotten way heavier.
Yeah.
If you look at all the fees and everything else that's on top of us, it's gotten way heavier. There's this thing any businessman knows, it's called the economy of scale. 20 plus million people living in the state of Texas. You're telling me we don't have the economy of scale to be able to build the roads and bridges that we need? Seriously? And still provide all the other services that we already have in place? This is a very law-abiding state. And there's absolutely no reason why we can't. We don't need to spend the kind of money in criminal jurisprudence that they do in Detroit or that they do in Illinois. There's absolutely no reason why we can't spend this money to build roads and bridges while at the same time too offering a high quality life and a high quality of life for people that live here in Texas.
Okay, we ran a little bit over, but you're welcome to a 5-minute closing.
I'd love to have your support. You know what I'll do if I'm elected. I'm not an unproven commodity, and I think the greatest frustration we all have, and you've seen it over the years, right? Since the Tea Party started in 2010, you've had a number of people that have come before you and have sought your endorsement, and they've disappointed you. And they've disappointed the taxpayers that sent them there, the voters that sent them there. And I made a commitment to you, to listen to you, to be available to you. And you know, I gave my cell phone number out, 281-770-7287, to 15,000 of my closest friends when I ran. And I was always willing to pick it up and listen and respond. And I always voted in a way that maintained the values, I think constitutional values and limited government values that you expected me and I expected myself. And I appreciate your support.
All right, thanks very much. Good luck
Thank
with
you.
your campaign.